What is up, guys? Wrestling Premier is here. Why didn't Chris Masters become a main eventer? This is episode 4 or 5 of why didn't this individual become a main eventer. In this series, I go in depth as to why this guy didn't become a main eventer. A lot of you guys know why, but this video isn't just about that. It's about their run in WWE and what did they think about their career, all that. For those of you that never seen the last ones, go watch them. You might like them, especially the Muhammad Hassan one. I'm almost done with the WrestleMania 17 script, and I'll post the video on April 1st. Yeah, I know it's April Fool's Day, but that was the same day that WrestleMania 17 occurred, and it'd be the perfect time to commemorate the greatest pay-per-view in probably wrestling history on that day. So for right now, we should talk about the masterpiece. But before I do, I'm planning on making this series. We look at a wrestler and we ask the question as to whether or not they are the GOAT. We give the pros, like the case for him being the GOAT. Like, for example, Hulk Hogan. He might be the GOAT. We'll give reasons why he could be and reasons why he might not be. So if you guys like the idea, comment it down below, and I'll be sure to make an episode in the coming days. Like, Bret Hart might be the first episode. I'm not even sure. Might be Bret Hart, could be Shawn Michaels, anyone. All I know is that I'm planning on making this series and also women's content. This is something I haven't made yet on this channel. The first video will be on Trish Stratus and Mickie James's feud, and that is coming next week. So expect that one real soon. I'm gonna look at that feud between those two. Right now, let's take a look at the masterpiece. Christopher Todd Mordetsky was born on January 8, 1983 in Santa Monica, California. He began to train with UPW at 16 to become a pro wrestler. During this time there, he suffered an injury which would leave him out for a few months, and he noticed that WWE began hiring guys from UPW. So he decided to take a long break from wrestling to focus on something that'll help him in the long run: bodybuilding. He worked on his physique, and eventually WWE called. He signed a developmental deal with the company in 2003, and he was sent down to OVW. In OVW, Chris Mordetsky became Chris Masters. In an interview with Wrestling Inc., Chris Masters explained how he became the masterpiece. And I quote, "It was like a process. I go out there and my real name is Chris Mordetsky, obviously. One day I came in and Dr. Tom Pritchard told me that I am no longer Chris Mordetsky. I am Chris Masters. And I didn't question it. And then I remember one day I was sitting around with Mickie James, Matt Morgan, maybe a couple of others. We were just sitting around hanging out, and I don't even know how we led into it, but Matt Morgan came up with masterpiece. So Matt Morgan, and I always give him credit for it even though he says I don't. Matt Morgan came up with a masterpiece, and it just clicked because I was already getting the perception of being a body guy. So he brought it to Jim Cornette the next day, and he was all over it right away, pumping me as the masterpiece Chris Masters. Eventually, when I got called up, the Master Lock was the next addition to the whole thing, so it all kind of tied together. That's kind of how it happened for me. Masters continued to develop in OVW, and in early 2005, vignettes signaling the masterpiece's arrival aired on WWE TV, and finally on the February 21st, 2005 episode of Raw, Chris Masters debuted. He was like a young version of Paul Orndorff. He even said it himself. He wasn't trying to be Lex Luger, he was trying to be like Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. In his debut, Masters destroyed Steven Richards and he accidentally broke his nose. He had a Polish hammer on Richards and he locked him in the Master Lock to emerge victorious. His debut in general was a mess. Here's what he has to say about it, and I quote, "I was a mess. I couldn't believe it, and I think I lost 10 pounds by the time I debuted, honestly. Just because of dehydration and not being able to eat and being sick. I make my debut, and it was the match where I break Stevie Richards' nose and his orbital bone. So all in all, it was not a great start. He suffered food poisoning the day he was set to debut. Like, how unlucky is that? After this, Masters began to demolish jobbers on Heat and Raw up until April. During this time period, Masters began to issue a challenge to anyone who could break his full Nelson. The reward for breaking the challenge was $1,000. Slowly and slowly, he began to up the ante. $3,000, $5,000. And this time around, main roster superstars took up the challenge and all of them failed to break the Master Lock. Sure, he turned down Big Show, but he was still undefeated. After a few months, Masters would finally be involved in a big program. On the August 22nd, 2005 episode of Raw, Shawn Michaels came out to discuss his matchup against Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam, and Chris Masters decided this was the perfect time to interrupt. He asked HBK if he's going to ever retire and let young guys like himself shine. Michaels said that nobody appreciates what Masters is doing more than himself, but he's biting off a little more than he could chew. Masters then told Michaels that he isn't trying to steal the spotlight because he's taking it. Michaels replied to this stating that there's a pecking order. HBK's at the top and Chris Masters is down below. He said, "Up here, it's a little hard to breathe." He then said that he understands where Masters is coming from, and he slapped him. The two brawled, and Michaels gained the upper hand. As you all know, this was the beginning of the feud between the two. In other words, it's 2020 right now. On the September 5th episode of Raw, Shawn Michaels took part in the Master Lock Challenge. By the way, this was Raw's main event. HBK, with his grit and determination, tried and tried and tried. The fans were deeply invested in this. They wanted Michaels to win this thing. He rammed Masters into the turnbuckle several times. He tried rolling out of the Master Lock. It was still locked in. Masters kept that thing locked in tight. The fans continued to root for Michaels. HBK. He was slowly fading, but with the fans' help, Michaels continued to gain momentum. He low-blowed Masters, but he still didn't let go. The Masterpiece's fingers began to separate, and he decided to slam Michaels down on the mat. He then grabbed a steel chair, and he blasted the Heartbreak Kid to bust him open. Masters locked him in the hold once again to win the challenge. He still didn't let go despite many officials coming out and trying to stop him. As for the commentary team, JR was cursing Masters like he was tearing him apart. The following week, Masters once again locked Michaels in the hold, and he passed out. At Unforgiven, Chris Masters had, to many, including myself, his best WWE matchup. Michaels once again stole the show and proved that he could have a great match with almost anybody. Now, Masters at this point wasn't great in the ring. Nonetheless, Michaels took control and put on an underrated bout. He escaped the Master Lock a few times, and at one point, he had the low blow Masters behind the ref's back. At another point, Chris Masters had it locked in tight, and HBK had nowhere to go. So what did he do? He jumped over the top rope to cause a rope break. That's the in-ring prowess and experience of Shawn Michaels. HBK then went up to the top rope, but he was caught in midair by Masters. He tried locking the full Nelson in, but HBK rolled out, and as Masters turned around, boom, he got the sweet chin music. Overall, a good matchup, and despite losing the matchup, it helped Masters immensely. In the interview, link is down below by the way, Masters discussed his experience working with Shawn Michaels, and I quote, "Oh, it was like a dream come true. It was like winning the world title basically, just cause, you know, I'm under the impression that he is probably, and I think a lot of people would agree, that he is probably the greatest in-ring performer ever. And I had watched his whole career, probably like a lot of people who are reading this interview. And I get to watch this amazing career that started as a tag team and progressively to where you get to work up to where you are the world champion. You know, for me to actually get to break into the business and work with him on a pay-per-view before he retired, I mean, that's a rare thing for any kid to be able to do. Any kid who looks up to a childhood hero, you know, to watch Kobe Bryant and then get to take him in a basketball game, you know, that's very rare. I know it was a really cool experience for me. I mean, we said a prayer before the match. Shawn was really good to me, especially when I first came in. He did a lot to help me, and he always took credit for making the masterpiece until I messed it up. After Unforgiven, Masters continued to gain momentum, and he was added to the Raw Survivor Series team to face SmackDown. Masters had a decent showing, and SmackDown won. On the December 12th episode of Raw, Chris Masters beat Viscera to qualify for the Elimination Chamber match at New Year's Revolution. Masters, in a promo 2 weeks later, promised everyone that he's going to become the youngest WWE champion at New Year's Resolution. Yeah, he called it Resolution. Chavo Guerrero ended that segment on top by throwing Masters out of the ring. I just wanted to mention that. At the event, Carlito went up to Masters and he told him that they should work together as a cohesive unit to eliminate everyone in the match. And in the end, it will be between both of them. Masters agreed, and during the match, both men did work as a cohesive unit. As a matter of fact, they double-teamed Kane and eliminated him. They were too much for HBK. John Cena got rammed into the steel by them, and they busted him open. And near the end of the match, Carlito convinced Masters to lock Cena in his Master Lock. He did it, and Cena realized that he was screwed. Like, just look at him. He was screaming in pain and agony. He knew he was going to get eliminated. But then, Carlito took advantage of this by low-blowing Masters and rolling him up for the elimination. As you all know, Carlito obviously got eliminated a few seconds later. Despite being eliminated by Carlito, Masters continued to work with him, and during this time period, Masters made Kurt Angle, who was going to be the next world champion, pass out to the Master Lock. On the January 16, 2006 episode of Raw, John Cena partook in the Master Lock Challenge. Masters once again had this damn thing locked in. Cena tried and tried and tried, but he just couldn't escape. He then started to make a comeback, and Masters' fingers were separating. Edge then suddenly ran down to the ring, and he clocked Cena with the WWE Championship. So at this point, no one had broken the Master Lock. HBK nearly did once again, but Masters cheated and slammed him on the mat, and Cena was on the verge of breaking it too, but Edge came out. Masters continued teaming up with Carlito, and they began a small feud with Kane and the Big Show. There was this segment in particular which was ridiculous if you think about it. Like, they're idiots. On the March 27, 2006 episode of Raw, Big Show was set to take part in the Master Lock Challenge. Beforehand, Masters, Carlito, Kane, and Murdoch attacked Kane and threw him into a room. Masters put a forklift in front of the door to prevent the big red machine from escaping. Big Show then appeared and he got rid of every single one of those guys. Masters and Carlito walked down to the ring, and during all of this, Big Show pushed that forklift out of the way. Now we see Kane coming from out of nowhere. He said that there was another door, to which Big Show replied that those two weren't very smart. Anyways, during the challenge, Masters whined about how Big Show was greased up. Once Big Show used the towel, Masters still couldn't lock him in. So this frustrated him, and what did he decide to do? He blasted the Big Show. This came back to bite him as the Giant chokeslammed him. At WrestleMania, Carlito and Chris Masters failed to win the tag team titles. Apparently, they were set to win the titles. This is what Masters had to say. Actually, the original plan was we were going to win the titles at WrestleMania. But then I think what happened was Kane and Big Show ended up dropping them to the Spear Squad, which shows that they made it not necessarily a plan. They wanted to turn Carlito babyface and keep me as a heel, which is what they did. So, we were supposed to win the tag belts originally, but then plans changed. Due to the loss, Carlito turned on Masters the next night on Raw, and weirdly enough, it was Carlito who turned face. Like, he was the guy who turned on Masters like several times. New Year's Revolution, Royal Rumble. He turned on him many times, yet he turned face. This led to a matchup between the two at Backlash. Masters lost, and following the event, he just disappeared. It wasn't until the August 28, 2006 episode of Raw that he returned. The reason why Masters was pulled off TV was because, you know what, here it is. It was a developing thing that kind of escalated in 2006 and became a problem, you know. I had to go away for a couple of months to rehab after the company became aware of my problems. It took a while to get over that. I went to rehab not even ready to deal with the mindset that I was an addict. It was so much responsibility, and I don't think I was mature enough to handle all that opportunity that was given to me. I didn't really appreciate it. I made a lot of mistakes, and it kind of derailed my career. It took a while for me to get myself back on track, but I did, and now I'm completely fine, clean, and sober. But I'm a walking miracle, and at one point I was taking 75 painkillers a day. Damn. Upon Masters' return, he was thinner. There was this one segment in particular that was memorable. I just learned about this a couple of months ago, I believe. Chris Masters was speaking to Eric Bischoff about Bischoff's book, and DX appeared. Triple H asked Chris if he's ever going to write a book. He said that he wants to make a book about nutrition, to which Triple H replied, "Oh, really? What is it going to be called? How to Lose 50 Pounds in 4 Weeks? Masters didn't really think much of this. Some people on the internet thought this was a big jab, and it might have been, but this is what Masters had to say. First of all, let me say that Triple H is a big ball buster. I don't think he's as devious as people make him out to be, but he's a ball buster. An equal opportunity ball buster. He takes shots at Shawn Michaels all the time. They were always taking jabs at each other, so it might have been the wrong message, yes, at the time. I don't think it was meant as a malicious thing. After this, Masters competed in the mid-card scene, and his Master Lock Challenge returned, but no one outright broke it. That was until the March 19, 2007 episode of Raw. Bobby Lashley was set to participate in the challenge. Masters once again had this thing locked in, but Lashley was determined to break it. And in the end, he actually broke it. This was the beginning of the end of Masters' first run in WWE. Following this, he was drafted to SmackDown, and he didn't really have a memorable moment. Sure, he did the Master Lock Challenge thing, but he wasn't pushed as he previously was. He was suspended twice due to the wellness policy, and on November 6, 2007, Chris Masters was released from his WWE contract. Now, to be honest, when I was a kid, I don't remember noticing that he got released. Like, it was like the Crime Time thing. They were gone, but then they came back a few months, or in Masters' case, a few years later. He once again explained this in an interview. Nah, I wasn't blindsided by the first one. I kind of felt like I brought it onto myself. I was trying to turn things around right at that point, but I had messed up. It was a dark period for me because I also got injured a week before I got released. I dislocated my elbow, and then a week later, first I was suspended for 60 days, and then I think that was on a Monday. Then Tuesday rolled around, and that's when Vince McMahon had done either a Bob Costas interview or something happened that day. Or there was some kind of thing with the government putting a lot of heat on Vince, and by Wednesday they had changed their minds and released me. But I took responsibility for that one, you know what I mean? I knew that I had kind of lost my way, lost my focus, and I was making mistakes. And that I probably wasn't at that point where I should be there, and I went off and did my thing. Masters competed outside the promotion for about 2 years with the ring name Chris Moore, before finally returning on the July 27, 2009 episode of Raw. This was such a random return. He did get a few cheers though from the fans that were familiar with him. He locked MVP in the Master Lock to prevent him from beating the clock, and this return once again wasn't really notable. Maybe he deserved better. What do you think? On the November 2nd, 2009 episode of Raw, the Masterpiece flexed his pecs to the song Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. This was the beginning of a face turn, I believe. He began to, connect a bit with the fans with this. He appeared in another backstage segment where he flexed his pecs to the song Boom Boom Pow. And on the December 7, 2009 episode of Raw, Masters finally turned face. On that night, he saved Hornswoggle from a Chavo Guerrero attack. Chavo Guerrero is about as menacing as SpongeBob. He locked Chavo in the Master Lock, and Eve was mesmerized by Masters' pecs. The following week, Carlito stole Matt Hardy's Slammy, and Masters suddenly locked him in the Master Lock. From there, he mostly competed on Superstars. He started to have good matches. Eve accompanied him to the ring for a bit, and he continued to improve in the ring. He got drafted to SmackDown in April of 2010, and once again, he wasn't really featured. Nonetheless, Masters in this second run compared to his first was a different man. He learned a hell of a lot, but it felt like he wasn't given the opportunities. He had a string of great matches on Superstars before he was suddenly released on August 5th, 2011. Masters was kinda taken aback to his release. Here's what he had to say once again, and I quote, "I was surprised, shocked. I felt kinda betrayed because I felt like I had worked so hard over the last year not to have a conversation of really why. After having some of the talks I had with Hunter and hearing about how high I was on everybody's list, it would have been nice to know a little more, specifically well, hey, this is the deal. We really just don't know what to do with you right now, you know what I mean? It's best if you go off and do your own thing rather than just tell me the company was restructuring. I mean, it was a combination of things. It was shock, betrayal, a lot of things. Looking back now, if they weren't going to use me at that point rather than continue to be buried or just on Superstars, it would probably have been better to do my own thing and stay low on the radar out here for a while, and then maybe see what's up in a couple of years. Nowadays, Masters is doing fine. At one point, he saved his mother from an arson attack. He uprooted a freaking tree and he used it as a battering ram to enter the house and save his mother. That is why he is a real-life superhero. Now, should have Masters been used better? What do you think? Personally, I thought in his first run he could be something, but he didn't have the experience or much skill to back it up. By his second run, he had the experience and the skills to back it up, but he wasn't given the same opportunities he was given in the first run. Nonetheless, the Masterpiece's run was decent, although it could have been better. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit a Polish hammer on the like button and perhaps the Master Lock on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.